Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm here with Sean Campbell, who is CEO of Cascade Insights, which is based in Oregon and does market research for B2B businesses. Welcome to Dashboard, Sean.
Hey, thanks for having me on. And just to throw this in here, I love what you guys are doing. I've been part of the Slack community, love the podcast. Just you guys do a super job.
I really appreciate that. And you've been a great part of the community. You've brought a lot of expertise that we didn't previously have, and I really appreciate that. So speaking of which, Sean, last week I had Sean Bussey of Kinesis on, and we talked about whether businesses should be working on making themselves discoverable on AI bots like ChatGPT. And Sean expressed the opinion that that would be a fool's errand. His approach is more, you need to build a brand and less think about platforms and tactics. You responded to that, Sean, on the 21 Hats Sounding Board, our Slack channel, that you disagreed. And I want to hear about that. But first, tell us about your business, Cascade Insights. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so we are a market research firm, and I say that we get hired for pain or opportunity. So we either have clients who've done it to themselves, they've got poor sales, poor marketing, poor products, or it's opportunity. They've got a new market, new industry, new solution. And for example, on that, we're doing a ton of generative AI research because we only work with the tech sector. And we also only work with B2B companies in the tech sector. So, it's not a big stretch to say almost every one of those companies is trying to inject AI in some way to one of their offerings, right?
Sure.
And so there's a lot of research with potential customers, prospects, certain market segments. And then in addition to that, I'm also an adjunct at a local business school, George Fox University, and there I teach a B2B sales course. And I also teach a generative AI course focused on its impact on various business roles. And I'm also going to be teaching kind of a second version of that course, a part 2, next year. So it's a space I feel like I know pretty well. I mean, as much as anybody should say, it's moving so blazingly fast that it's definitely hard to keep up on all of it. But it is something that I'm kind of swimming in pretty much every hour of the day.
That's a little scary. Tell me, can you give us a quick sense of a project that you do for a typical client? What do you do for them?
Yeah. So like a real typical thing would be somebody comes to us and says, let's just focus on marketing for a minute, because that's maybe one of the more common things we might address. I mean, we might also address product deficiencies or sales deficiencies, but we are trying to get a particular market segment to engage with us, and we are just somewhat lost, either because we might feel we're not targeting the right market segment for our offering. We might feel we're sending the wrong messages to them. We might feel that we're not doing that as effectively as our competitors, right? So it might start with those kinds of problems, back to getting hired for pain, right? And then basically we will go in and say, all right, if that's the business problem, what study could we design that would give you, in the end, really meaningful actions for you to take? And those kind of bookends of sorts end up having in the middle, between those two, a lot of research interactions. And those might be in-depth interviews with potential customers, right? Or even lost customers. Or it might be a quantitative survey we do. We might do focus groups. But the methodology is important, but to me, what's really, really important is that we're really locked in on what the business problem is you have. And then therefore we can actually design a research study that'll turn around and give you actual things that you should go do to go help with that business problem. And that's basically what we do every day around here. We got about 13 people working for me now across every time zone in the US at least. And it's a lot of fun. We get presented with a lot of challenging problems. We have an informal motto, because it's not really a formal one when you hear it. We deliver bad news to good people. And the point is that, like, with research, you don't want just everything to be confirmed, right? Like there's a point at which you want somebody like us to say, but there's this thing you're not acting on. There's this thing you don't know, right? And in a way that usually lands as a bit of bad news, because no leadership team wants to think that there's something they don't know or they're not acting on, right? But at the same time, that leads to really good outcomes in the end, right? So that's where that little, like, we deliver bad news to good people. And the good people part is just, I feel like if you're willing to put your business under the microscope a little bit and let somebody else kind of scratch at it, and even more so have somebody else talk to your customers or competitor customers and have them come back really candidly and say, you're not really ready for prime time here. That takes a little bit of courage too. But so that's what we do all day.
That's really interesting. I love that line. So let's get to that question at hand. I think if I recall correctly, in your comment on our Slack channel, you basically said that before long, very soon, the way people are going to find out about other businesses is by asking for a recommendation from someone like ChatGPT. How close are we to that?
I think we're already there in some market segments. I mean, in the segment that we're in, technology, I hear it all the time. If you've got a buyer inside a Microsoft or an Amazon Web Services or even like a verticalized focused SaaS company, that's focused on a particular vertical, they're fairly savvy with all these tools, right? Where do they go when they have a question? They go to ChatGPT. Now that pretty much all of these tools, right? There's some exceptions in terms of like how much access they have to the internet or how much real-time access they have. But for the ones that have real-time access, a ChatGPT, things like that, it's a very logical leap to say, I'm asking this thing to solve problems for me all day. Why wouldn't I ask it to find a vendor? And the problem with that, a little bit what I responded to is that AIs don't necessarily buy on brand. Now you can quibble a bit and be like, well, brand is content and messaging and all this stuff. And yes, but like sometimes people think of brand as like, how do I feel about the brand and what does it do for me? And, what kind of emotive aspects do I have? And do I like the colors? AI doesn't really care about colors yet. I mean, it's not going to care that much. It's not going to really care about the typography that you have on your website, right? It's going to care a lot about the content and the meaning behind it and how targeted it is. And it's how focused it is on solving a particular problem and targeting a particular ICP and a set of buyers, right? And that's part of marketing too. But yeah, it's kind of scary for a lot of people. I mean, we've spent decades now trying to optimize for Google and basically try to guess at to what Google was going to rank our content for, right? I mean, there's a whole industry built around guessing what Google's going to do. And now we have a whole new player in town that isn't just Google. I mean, they have Gemini for sure, but like now we have a bunch of different front doors that our customers might walk through in an attempt to find us. And that's scary. It also presents some opportunities, if maybe you were struggling to rank. So there's a lot there that's going on for sure.
I don't like to put words in anybody's mouth, but I think Sean Bussey would kind of agree with you that part of what you just described there as being part of marketing and branding is what he was referring to. But his larger point, I think, was that just as kind of the SEO environment kind of got polluted in certain ways, it's not what it was when Google first introduced AdWords and, pay-per-click was a lot easier to use and all that. His point that he made here on the podcast was that being a generative AI bot is an expensive thing to do. And if they're ever going to make money, they're going to have to start charging people. And it's going to be a lot like SEO, where the big brands are going to take over. And his point was that that's going to be a loser's game in the long run, and that you need to build a brand so that people find you in other ways, and your name means something. How do you respond to that?
The problem I have sometimes when I hear somebody say that, right? It's like, and I've had this before AI, right? Like, you need to build a brand. And it's like, it really depends on what you're driving at when you say that. Because if you say Cascade Insights, you need to build a brand. I tell you, we've been a very successful company for like 19 years now. And you know what? I don't think we have a brand that a bunch of people in tech know. We're not the Coke of market research. And so then it starts to beg a lot of questions about like, well, what do you mean? Do you mean a brand in a narrow space that's really well known for that? What exactly does that mean, right? Because we're also pretty narrow. I mean, anybody listening to this probably maybe has never even talked to anybody who does what we do as narrow as we do, right? And that's fine, right? So we're already pretty narrow. So I think that's where I have more of an issue, because we're going to find a world where the AI is going to take some pretty darn logical decisions in terms of what it surfaces for you. And you won't necessarily have 92 pages to paginate through, right? Not that that was a great experience either. I went to a Gartner conference, a million years ago, and it was the thing that stuck in my head about it when a guy was talking about Google and SEO is he said, using a search engine is like staring into a tiny hole in a door and you're looking for a penguin. And somebody on the other side holds up a picture of a penguin and says, this one, and then does it again, and then does it again, and then does it again. And it's like, yeah, that's how horrible it is, right? Because you got to go to every link. You have to look at that page, decide if you want that vendor. I mean, just think of the allure people are going to have when they go to an AI and they're like, just tell me where to go.
Well, if they like the answer they get.
Right? It's almost like asking for a referral, right? Like it's like the glory of a great referral, right? You just saved me all that at the end of the day. And that's scary because it changes, I think, what your marketing mix needs to be and what you need to invest in to make that AI rank what you want it to rank. And I'm not disagreeing about the pay thing. One quick thing on that. Sure, these things cost a blazing amount of money to operate. But on the other hand, I think it's a little short-sighted to assume they're going to use the business model that preceded. This is so unique and so differentiated and so changing to just everything, and everybody's noticing that. Maybe we'll have a different way of monetizing it. Maybe it won't just be inline ads, right? So I don't know if it quite ends up there. Maybe that is where it ends up, but maybe not.
But even from what you just described, it sounded scary to me in this sense. The point you were making is how great would it be if you just ask, who should I use? And you got an answer.
Right.
But if you're only getting one answer, it's not going to be very long before that one answer.
You won't get one answer though. Like because an AI is interactive, a lot of times you can just say, like, give me eight great doctors that deal with advanced knee surgeries, right? And it'll give you 8, but it doesn't necessarily give you their website immediately, right? Maybe the link's in there, right? And then you say to it, tell me the background of these doctors and tell me what their experience is with my particular type of ski-based knee injury, right? All of that changes kind of this infrastructure that we built up that assumes people are doing that on our website. And that's, I think, really the big thing that's differentiated, right? Like what you see in Google search is a really narrow subset of your website, kind of by design, because it's going 1 penguin, 2 penguins, 3 penguins, right? And it's this meta and a link. But with an AI, it's interactive, which is obvious, right? But at the same time, that alone very radically changes the buyer's journey, right? They may spend 80% of the funnel just hanging out in an AI chatbot window. That's a big change.
All right, that makes sense. I buy that. Tell me this. If a business is thinking about what it needs to do to prepare for this as it comes, or if in fact it's already here, what should businesses be doing to make themselves discoverable through this channel?
The very first thing is figure out if you're discoverable. Like, in other words, it's only $20 a month. You know what I mean? For ChatGPT Plus, right? You know what I mean? Like, so sign up for that, sign up for Gemini, sign up for Claude, because the first thing is it a problem for you? Right? Like, maybe you're one of the fortunate ones, right? Which should be some people at least, right? Because what are these things built on? They siphon the entire internet. Now they're going to interpret the internet differently than Google's SEO algorithm. So you will it's guaranteed that it'll look different and you may not rank, but first test. And then the second thing I would do is, think like an AI and maybe even spend a little bit of a time understanding how these LLMs are constructed. I'm not talking about like eons of time. I'm just like, go watch some TED Talks to start, right? There's more you can get into, but understand how one of these AI platforms think. It's not super hard. There's all kinds of content about this. Like, why does it serve me up the things it does? Why does it kind of think through it that way? And understanding kind of fundamentally how these things are built might give you also a little bit of a clue of the types of content you need to build. And the last thing I'd say is things that are meaningful, things that have depth, things that have context. These also positively impact SEO and they also positively impact an AI. But to go back to what I said earlier, Does your typography matter like it used to? If somebody spends 80% of their time in a chat window, no, because they won't see your beautiful website. Not until the very end. And by then, maybe they haven't picked you. They picked two other guys and they're looking at their websites. So that's where I think it's really interesting. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the things we've invested in to show somebody our website don't really matter to the AI as nearly as much, right? And if the AI is where somebody's spending their time in that very plain vanilla chat window interface, that's got to change some things.
Well, let me give you an example. The example is me in 21 Hats. I did sign up. I have I have a paid version of ChatGPT, and I asked it, could you recommend a peer group podcast for me? I got a podcast that features business owners who have a peer group conversation about what's actually going on a day-to-day basis in their business, not a podcast with someone looking back on distant memories of their struggle and then their future great success. And it gave me a list of 5 podcasts that, in my opinion, are fine podcasts, but didn't really fit that description, which I think is a fair description of what I try to do here at 21 Hats. And then I tried it again a few weeks later, and it gave me 2 responses. It said, we're going to give you 2 choices here. The first response is another 5 podcasts like the first time, which were fine, but not really responsive to what I was asking. And then a second response, which started with it saying, this is almost a direct quote, that sounds like your podcast, the 21 Hats podcast. And it listed that, and it described it as a peer group conversation. And then it listed a few others, which I think were closer to the mark, but not right on target. And it asked me which of those 2 responses I preferred. And I said I preferred the second one.
Go figure. Right. Exactly.
Yeah, right. And then I asked it, would you recommend the 21 Hats podcast to someone who is looking for a business owner peer group podcast? And it said, yes, it would. And I asked it, well, what could I do to make it more likely that you would make that recommendation? And it actually gave me some, really generic suggestions. And I know you got to follow up, and I probably should have, but I didn't have time at that moment, and I haven't gone back to it. So I guess I'm asking you the same question. What would I need to do to make sure that it actually makes that recommendation to other people, not just the host of the podcast?
Well, one thing is we're dealing with a black box to some extent, like we have always dealt with Google, right? In the sense that there's always going to be a certain amount of inability to connect A with B because we can't really peer into the platform. But I'll tell you another thing that makes it harder sometimes with LLMs, and I'll just direct folks to this because this would like nerd out for like way too long. But if you look into how like vector databases work and how the plumbing of these things are actually constructed, right? And I could talk for longer about this, but I won't because it just everybody's eyes will glaze over, right? Who's listening? But the point is that there is a challenge even for people who construct these things sometimes in determining exactly how it got to the path of XYZ answer, right? Even if ultimately that answer is a logical one, right? And a useful one. And, if anybody's curious about that, just go start searching about vector databases and how they're used in building out LLMs and tokenization and a whole bunch of other things that you'll bump into pretty quickly. And it'll kind of open your eyes to a little bit of that. And it's at the heart of when people talk about LLMs hallucinating. It's one of the reasons that's possible. Okay. Even though the amount of that has greatly greatly lessened since, let's just say a year ago or whatever. But I think the biggest thing to focus on is think about meaning and depth and value, right? Which if you write to those things, if you create content that hits those particular, call it little, triangle of values, that's going to be something that I would imagine in most cases, a lot of the generative AI platforms that are out there now are going to see as something that they want to surface, right? Because these things are driven by content at the end of the day. And so, that's fundamentally what's happened. We have something that is super powerful, has impressive computing abilities, and it siphoned the entire internet, before it did that. And so ultimately, that's where you want to go. But some of those softer, squishier things that we use to impress humans, maybe not as much.
But it sounds a little bit similar to building a brand and practicing good SEO habits. I mean, I think what I heard from you is if I have positive experiences with my customers and they say good things about me on the internet, and if I get written about in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or somewhere that has some reach and credibility, that all those things will make it more likely that I show up either in a Google search or in an LLM. Is that
Well,
correct?
to a degree, like I said, I think the distinction I'm trying to make is that, when I hear build a brand, maybe this comes out of the day job, that I've got. Like if we do a brand study, like if we analyze a company's brand, we may be looking at things like awareness and usage and consideration and advocacy. But the team that is focused, let's say, in a company on building the brand may take into all those things into account. They may say, like, brand development includes everything that's ever said about us. That's our brand. But there's also a slightly more narrower version of that definition that you equally see, which is like our brand is, kind of basically our core brand promise. And it's our core, value props, and it's the colors and the typography and how our website's laid out. You know, the kind of things like a web development firm might share as being critically important. Now, they wouldn't necessarily discount the value of good content and good SEO, but I think it's just, you're selling to a machine even more so than you were with Google in a way, right? And I think that's got to change a little bit, maybe at least where you put your emphasis when you're thinking about like, where's my marketing dollars going to go and what do I want to create and who am I creating it for?
Can you tell us a little bit about how you've approached this for Cascade Insights? What steps have you taken to try to improve your discoverability?
Well, I think we got a little lucky because that's usually where we have spent our time over the years. Now, on the other hand, some of that is a forcing function of being a smaller company that sells to large companies, right? Like I can't possibly spend enough to make, the brand of a dozen or so person company stand out to everybody in a large multinational. I mean, there's just not enough revenue in the building. I don't care what we were doing. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so what I've had to do is basically write stuff over the years that's incredibly on point, that's really focused at a narrow audience, that provides a lot of value. And frankly, to somebody who's not in our lane, they wouldn't want to read it. I mean, like that's to me a big piece of it, right? It's almost like you have to write stuff that is incredibly attractive to one audience and it's almost really unattractive to somebody else, right? It's not generalist writing. And that the minute a lot of these platforms came out, the people on my marketing team, we started looking at them because this, we're doing research in the space all the time. We're like, we already rank pretty well. That's interesting. You know what I mean? And what's really weird is we rank better than some of the bigger brands. The ones that I know that are out there, they don't show up. And, it's a difficult thing to peer behind the veil of these things, partly by design, partly just kind of the technologies that are actually used to construct these things, and partly it just, there's going to be IP issues that we're never going to get around in terms of what these companies are going to say. But for us, it's worked out pretty well. I mean, in a way, it's actually great. We already had really good SEO ranks for the audiences in terms that we wanted, but we actually rank even better in the Gen AI tools. So to me, that's a win at the end of the day.
And it also suggests that what you were doing for SEO reasons translated, correct?
Correct. Again, I think as long as you were focused and narrow, right? I think of like taking nothing against, guys that like blow moss off your roof, right? But we hired somebody to do that. The Pacific Northwest just grows moss left and right. You know what I mean? It has a couple obvious characteristics as to why it might, right? And so, like, everybody around here is blowing moss off their roof. It feels like every 6 months, right? Otherwise, you just have a perfectly green roof. It looked pretty until your roof fell apart. But like, that guy who's just broadcasting, we do moss removal. I don't know how that's going to play out. You know, there's a lot of things that are unknown. How good are these Gen AI platforms going to be at localized search? That's been one of Google's kind of shticks for a while, right? You go in and you're like, find me the top, moss cleaning companies in my area, right? And this isn't me being dismissive about that. I mean, you know what I mean? I'm not being dismissive
Sure.
about that as a line of work at all. Far from it. I grew up in Chicago in like a really blue collar neighborhood. Like I tell people, like if they watch the movie Rudy, that was basically like everybody I knew growing up is like could have been an extra in that movie basically. And so like 100%. My dad even wanted me to go to Notre Dame and I didn't go, and I didn't have the grades, but there was that too. Regardless, but he would have wanted it, like just like the guy in the movie. And so, I think my point is like that. I worry about that side of it, right? Like because fundamentally, to go back to something I said earlier, right? Everybody probably has heard the term the buyer's journey, right? And the idea that has changed and that a lot of that is digital now. And a lot of that is on the internet. And we've known that for a long time now. And how that penetrated different industries and jobs, jobs to be done, so to speak, the people we're hiring folks for, obviously was varied. Like certain industries that happen quick and certain industries that happen slow. But it's definitely true of almost every industry now, right? That you expect customers are going to go through the internet for a while before they get to you. Now it's a whole different set of doors, right? I mean, for a long time, and think about it, all we ever cared about was Google. I mean, who really uses Bing? At the end of the day. I mean,
I've wondered about that.
Right. There's a door. And yeah, maybe it was hard and it was complicated, but even that alone is kind of frightening, right? Because there's no guarantee that ChatGPT and OpenAI win this battle. Maybe it's Anthropic with Claude. Maybe it is one of the big guys like Microsoft with Copilot or Google with Gemini, or maybe it's somebody we haven't even heard of yet. It's still early.
Have you seen differences in their approach? I mean, is it?
Sure. Well, because Claude doesn't have direct access to the internet currently. Claude is like the way we used to talk about ChatGPT before it had access to search, where its data set was capped at a certain window, right?
Right.
And then, and Gemini, I used to think was pretty horrible until like a lot of people did until just somewhat recently. And it's really strong. I mean, if no one's looked at their tool called Deep Research, like say you're going to go make a complex purchase decision of something kind of, fairly meaningful, meaty B2B, millions of dollars, or even just, tens of thousands of dollars. You can go into Deep Research and say, I would like a report on everything in this space. And it will just churn away and go grab and it'll show you the links. It'll grab 80, 90 links and pull it all together. You know what I mean? And give you a nice report. I showed my students that in my Gen AI class I teach at the university. And I had to quickly say, just to be clear, in your other classes, AI use needs to be approved by the professor. You know what I mean? Like before you I could totally see the eyeballs go, wait a minute, I don't have to write reports anymore. No. That's not what I said. But anyway, the point is like, yeah, there are differences. And that's why I think you have to explore. Perplexity is another one. Super powerful tool, right? They are clearly moving by what you can kind of see publicly toward more of an ad model, right? That's a really powerful. So, but that goes back to now everybody's got to go through 9 different doors, at that point.
So has your approach that you said, you saw you were ranking right from the beginning, has that been true on all of these different tools?
No, not necessarily.
So different tactics work better on different.
Well, and part of it is, and this might resonate with listeners too, or at a minimum, I think it'd resonate with you. I know just from watching you in the show and the community, right? This will tie in 1 second. I promise. It'll only take 10 seconds to hear. Like I've said for years, as an owner of a moderately small company, if you're not used to something sitting in the corner, rattling, making noise that you can't quite get to yet, you're going to lose your mind. because you can't possibly fix everything you want to fix as a business owner every day, right? So you have to figure out when you're going to tackle A and B. And like, as you might have seen on your show, some guys are not good at making that decision, and then life sucks for them. So to me, where I'm at now is I know we don't rank as well as I'd like in some of them. So then what as a 12-person company do we do, right? Like we can only create so much content at X volume, right? And so what we've done is for our audience and our ICP and who we target, we've tilted our content calendar a bit and changed some of the topics that we're going to discuss for what we believe will lead to some better ranking in those engines, right? But the problem is that takes time, right? I'm just really thankful that what we've been pushing out for content for the last 19 years, or, not that it really cares about something we already wrote 19 years ago, but let's say the last 5 years, right, is something that in the end, when they turned these things all on and they gave us access, they were like, yeah, you guys are all right. So I'm just thankful for that.
Got it. Sean, I expected to get you out of here a lot quicker. I apologize. I just couldn't stop asking questions.
No. I'm glad to pay it forward, man. You guys have been great. And I seriously, to anybody who's only listened to an episode or two, go back, listen to the back catalog. These guys are great. They're super.
Sean, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Sean Campbell is CEO of Cascade Insights, which is based in Oregon and does market research for B2B businesses, not for moss blowers. But we're going to have you back, and maybe at some point you'll have an answer for those moss blowers. I'm sure that will resonate with my audience.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Sean. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.